Welcome to the meeting of the Sarnia Police Service Board for Thursday, May 22nd. Good morning to my colleagues on the board, to our staff, to members of the media, and to the public and those who are watching online. I'll start today with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which the Sarnia Police Service operates is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples, referred collectively as the Anishinaabe. It is through the connection of the Anishinaabe with the spirit of the land, water, and air that we recognize their unique cultures, traditions, and values. Together as treaty people, we have a shared responsibility to act with respect for the environment that sustains all life, protecting the future for those generations to come. I'll ask members of the board if there are any declarations of conflict of interest this morning. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, approval of the agenda. I have a motion to approve the agenda today. Board member Sebastian moves, board member Ash seconds. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Agenda is approved. And then we have 2 sets of minutes in the package from our March 27th meeting, and then a special meeting on April 25th. I have a motion to approve those 2 sets of minutes. Board member McRoberts and board member Gillis seconds. Questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's approved. That brings us to item number 6, our monthly operation update, and I will turn that over to the deputy chiefs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Just for the operational update this month, we had a good opportunity to overlay 2 heat maps because we missed the meeting in April. So as we put this together, it was nice to see how things have changed over the course of 2 months with respect to where the concentration of the calls are. You can see that in March, they were pretty dispersed, but as the weather started to get a little bit nicer in April, you can see that the concentration really settled in along that, what I would call our the front Christina X Mill Street areas, essentially our retail area of the city. So yeah, other than the Lambton Mall, obviously, which would be its own isolation, but all of the smaller shops are really centered along there. And it could be reflective of the fact that it is the retail, but also too, it's highly residential as well. But you can see that that concentration is really focused in on that first L-shaped corridor there along that area. And part of the contributions to that is the shoplifting that is happening within our community. And we take shoplifting very seriously. We don't look at it as a low level crime because it's not what it is. It oftentimes is not an impulsive chocolate bar that is put into somebody's pocket. It is well thought out. I'm careful to use the word organized because when you talk about crime and organized crime, it talks about something else. But people are planning these events. They're going in with lists in order to obtain items that they can later trade for drugs. And so we realize that the people that are involved in that are an issue for us, so we concentrate on it. And as a result of that, you can see in the package later down, well below those heat maps is some highlights of those projects. We're dealing with people who are extremely violent. They'll flee from the police. Drug charges, significant drug charges result from that. So overall, over the course of the 2 months there, you can see that from the statistical standpoint, there's an increase in our call volume from the same period as last year. There's an increase in our charges. However, there's a decrease in our arrests. Now, arrests can fluctuate significantly. We can have one officer who may go out and concentrate solely on offender management, skew those numbers. So I expect that we'll see those increase as well throughout the year. Finally, with respect to the downtown core area and down Exmouth Street, in June, we are going to be revealing who our downtown village constable is. So we're in the process right now of identifying that officer. And you'll remember that last year what we did was we ran the downtown core project using officers essentially walking the beat. And so they were tasked with each and every day to go down and to address the issues with the residents of that community and the store owners. And this year we're going to have one dedicated officer who will be supplemented with other officers throughout the organization, who's going to be dedicated on a daily basis to working this exact area of the heat map and, partnering with the business owners and the community members in there to address the issues that they face. So subject to any questions on those items, I'll turn it over to Deputy Hanson to speak to more investigative side of the stuff that's happened over the last couple of months.
So just before we do that, just a couple of questions from the board. So Board Member Roberts.
Thank you. On the heat map, like what is exactly in that area that, like, are they breaking into businesses or, I mean, there's not a lot going on there, right?
No, so what you're seeing there, and you can tell by the purple color. So each one call is going to create some color. So if we have high frequency addresses like Laurel Lee area, then you're going to see a high concentration in that area, which is going to very much skew that color. And just speaking about the Laurel Lee area, I can tell you that this year alone, we've responded to 225 events in direct relation to that one small little intersection there, which has accounted for 224 man hours of our officers. We've laid 16 or 42 charges and made 16 arrests just at that intersection area. So that would be on the other side, like in the 800 block of Exmouth Street, Melrose, the Laurel Lee Park area. So that would increase that color significantly and the concentration of it there. So we do have some high frequency addresses that we respond to, and that's what that's based on.
Thank you.
Board Member Gillis.
Just coming back to the area, I received a lot of calls, and I'm sure you have as well, with regard to the Laurel Park
Yes.
and how it's being made impacted with all of the paraphernalia that people are finding. And we had a kind of coordinated effort when things were happening in Rainbow Park. Do we have the same type of coordinated effort with bylaw Laurel Park?
Yeah. Yes, we do.
Okay.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we are working side by side with bylaw. Bylaw does a lot of work with respect to the encampments and the pop-up. What you're seeing in the Laurel Lee area is very transient coming out of the overflow shelter that is there. And so there are lots of foot traffic, which is more when you get the trespassing aspect, which the majority of these calls are a police response as opposed to the bylaw response.
Okay, Board Member Sebastian.
In terms of drivers for this, because the incident also increased very specifically from March into April. And whether it's coincidence or not, that was around the time that we also dispersed the Rainbow Park area. So that was a transition from March, I think, to April. And coincidentally, our unemployment rate increased in Sarnia. We dropped about 15,000 jobs. So I don't know what you folks see out there as potential drivers for the increase between March and April.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. I think the impact that we're seeing from the closure of Rainbow Park, for lack of a better term, is just the geographical location where the concentration of our calls are. There's so many factors that can increase the amount of calls. I know that I only highlight a certain few in there. However, we track vehicle stops, for instance, as a CAT event for us, which would also, like if we're doing more traffic stops, that would increase our calls for service as well. So I would have to do a deeper dive into the analytics of everything to figure out exactly what is creating that significant delta in the amount of calls from this year to last year. But just right off the top of my head, I know that our traffic services unit, since the break of the weather, is contributing significantly to the police response to certainly traffic areas as well. I think the chief has.
Just in terms of statistics, it's important to look at trends, not small windows. So we're reporting monthly, so that's our requirement. So sometimes you're going to see a little more wild fluctuations. When we're looking at operational response, we're looking at trend lines. So you might see a 17% jump in a month and then a decline, and we're looking over a longer period of time, because this is statistically, this is a very small window to make decisions on. And frankly, March and April is the winter, and it happens every year. When the snow melts, calls change, and then we get into summer. So we would look at an annual aggregate of calls for service. The smaller you go, the more wild the fluctuations become. So we look at the trend lines. And in terms of the heat map, think of the heat map as a representation of our visual demand for workload. It's not necessarily, it's just where the calls are. That's where we go. If you look across the city, you see we're responding everywhere from Brights Grove to Amgenong. Calls are all over the place, but the concentration, the most demand is represented in the red areas, just by default. That's where we go. So it's just important for the public to know that's where the demand is centralized.
So thank you for that. I appreciate that we want to look at longer term trends as opposed to month over month. But I noticed in the report that as compared to the previous year, 16% and 17% increases in the number of occurrences, and to me that's significant, and that could be interpreted that there actually is more crime. Or it could be interpreted that there's just more reporting of crime. I think it's the former, but I invite you to comment.
I agree. For the easiest
Or is it
answer,
both, perhaps? Is it more crime and more reporting?
well, there's a number of different factors that impact it. I would think that if we looked at a statistical trend over a number of years, you're going to see a significant incline in the amount of calls for service that the Sarnia Police is having. So we could break that one down potentially for the next operational update to display that. If ask the subjective opinion of every officer within this organization, they're going to say they're busier. So it is just something that we feel, but also we're seeing reflected in the statistics. And I think that's probably a trend everywhere.
And I noticed in the annual report too, which we're going to get to, but certainly our CSI has increased over the years too. Chief,
Jump in on some stats here. So call volume, calls for service is a generic term that we use across the board. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, that it's a call from a citizen. So the way calls for service work, it essentially means anytime we generate an occurrence number in the comm center and we assign an officer to an event, that event can be sourced from a number of different places. It can be sourced from 911. It can be sourced from officers can initiate an event themselves. So, but those are the calls for service, which we label, but the term isn't intuitively accurate. So when we're talking about increases of call volume, that can come from different areas. So for example, calls from 911 year to date are down 8% this year so far, 911, but officer initiated calls are up 116%. So when we're talking about workload volume, what you're seeing is the capacity of the Sarnia Police Service to start to do some more proactive work, which is where we've been historically lacking. So when we're seeing some of the increase in call volume is attributable to officers now having the opportunity to proactively go out and self-initiate investigations or different calls for service, be it traffic stops, be it community outreach, be it criminal arrests, those types of things, but the source is the officer's initiative. And that, I think, that's an important aspect of community policing that we've been really focusing on as an organization to ensure that we can start to do some more of that proactive work, because that's critical for our community trust. It's critical to deal with community concerns. And when you're just responding to calls, when you're just reactive as a police organization, you can't get to those other parts. Like if it's a busy day, you don't have time for visibility patrol or for checking the parks or any of those types of things. You have to go to emergencies. So as we create capacity, whether it's through efficiencies or new policies or new technologies, that capacity gets redeployed into proactive activity, which you're seeing if just anecdotally this year with 4,635 CAT events this year are officer initiated so far. That's up 116%, Jan 1 to May 22nd, 2025 over 2024.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Conseco and Deputy Chief Henson. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I could just ask one question, the intimate partner violence. How many of those calls are repeat same site? Do we have those stats? Like, do we have 20 families that are seriously having this issue and they're going back to the same spots?
So we look at, a couple things with partner violence, and I can say this, we don't release the media of IPV occurrences to protect the identities of the victims. Like there's some challenges there. I can say as a police service though, we deal with some very serious IPV incidents, and we've dealt with some very serious IPV incidents in this community over the past 6-7 months. If for any other heading, they would be very prominent media releases, but there's some constraints. So every IPV incident, intimate partner violence incident, is looked at from a holistic type of approach. So if someone makes a complaint, we look not only at the incident that we've been called for, but we do look at the histories. We assess the risks. We look at the social environment. How much risk is the victim at of the others? There's a raft of investigative tools that are used to assess the potential for further violence, to assess the ability to provide victims with places of safety, and to prevent further occurrences. So every IPV case, to answer your question, does look at all the historical issues. We do have tools inside the service for any category of investigation or crime that will bubble up frequent flyers, to use that term, so we can see who is most often. It's not just most often an accused. We can see who's most often the victim, who's most often the complainant. We can look at some of those pieces and see the frequency of their presence in our calls for service.
So could we say, sort of follow up, there are just a small group that are repeats?
IPV is a little different. There's different reasons for that. And I think the comment was, if people lose their jobs, that it's a risk factor for intimate partner violence, not necessarily violence, but certainly stress and some of those challenges that come with any type of relationship. So it depends. It depends on the crime category.
Okay, thank you.
So I just add that I can tell you, I read a lot of reports, and there are many that have multiple instances of IPV. So it's a
My
mixed bag.
concern is, do we have 117 families that are struggling with this violence, or is it like 25 and we're trying to cap it off and look after it and get people where they need to be? But I'm happier knowing there's few, not that that's a good term to use, but I'm grateful that there's not 117 families.
But you work closely with victim services, and victim services does follow up with every incident of intimate partner violence for the support and the resourcing that people may need.
All right, well, good morning. So on the investigative side, so just to segue from what Deputy Van Sickle was saying in regards to the shoplifting, there's also, as we all know, there's drug epidemic within all communities, not just Sarnia, but I'm more dealing with Sarnia. So you'll see in the operation report this month that, there's a lot of drug activity, a lot of drug enforcement that's been taking place. The major case action team has been doing search warrants, seizing lots of drugs, cash, addressing open air drug use as well. We've made several arrests where people were openly using drugs, and that was one of the complaints that we were getting from the community, that we were turning a blind eye to that. So as you know, the PPSC has kind of given us some direction in terms of what to do for simple possession. So now we're looking at the totality of the situation. So we will be laying simple possession now, if there are other mitigating factors that allow us to do so. So you'll see in the operation report that we are doing that. Again, on the drug side, you'll note that in the report there was a shooting on Omjanon where an individual was shot through the leg. The investigators did a search warrant there and got a significant amount of fentanyl, loaded firearm, and we laid significant charge on that. So we're seeing a lot of violent offenses as well. So that's why you're seeing the increase in our CSI. It just, I can't attribute to anything other than just a violent community, and we need to kind of do whatever we can to try and curb that behavior. On the drug use too, we did a search warrant back in February, and some of the samples were sent off to Health Canada, and they came back as a very potent opioid. To try and pronounce this, it's called protodestinitazine. It's 3 times more potent than fentanyl, and it's being cut into the fentanyl with other cutting agents. So with the public health, we did a media release, and we notified the public of this new drug because there's a higher rate of, or potential for more increased overdose deaths, sorry. Further, we did have a sexual assault on a 14-year-old in the downtown core where we quickly arrested the individual responsible. It was a stranger sex assault. We did charge that person, and that person remains in custody. That one created a lot of public response. Obviously, it's outrageous that a young 14-year-old was sexually assaulted in the manner that she was. But I think the quick response by Uniform Patrol really brought that one to a quick conclusion.
Can I ask, he remains in custody, is that because he was denied bail or he couldn't raise it?
I denied that. Yeah. So we are starting to see more people being kept in custody, which is a good thing. But again, I think the reason for that is because we're doing a better job in articulating to the Crown and to the Justice why somebody should remain in custody. So I think that's. And then the final thing I want to talk about is Project Bobcat. It's in the operational report, but that started with a simple interaction with a member of the public who was carrying golf clubs down the road in the middle of winter. So members of the intelligence office who do our federal management stopped this individual, determined that maybe these golf clubs could be stolen, maybe they're not. So they took a picture of them. They did a subsequent investigation. They learned that they were in fact stolen. So that led us into identifying a person who was involved in trafficking and possession of stolen property, which led to us identifying an address where stolen property was being taken to. We recovered and you'll see this, I think, from our previous board report, where we recovered a stolen backhoe, Bobcat, skid steer. And then from that, we did search warrants and retrieved a whole pile of stolen property. And then that project continued. So we seized a bunch of cell phones. We went through the cell phones under a search warrant. And in those cell phones, we obtained evidence of firearms trafficking, copper wire theft. So you might remember back the last 2 months ago, there was up in Whites Grove, the internet was down because of copper line being stolen. So we identified people responsible for that. In the end, over a 4-month period of time, we laid a ton of charges, arrested about 8 people, and it was a great investigation, and that was led by the intelligence unit. So some good successes, and I think that mentality of doing project-based stuff for our office is going to continue, and we hope to see more of these big successes in the future. So, subject to any questions, that's what I have.
And I think, Chief, did you have a comment or?
Just a couple things to add, for Deputy Hansen, since his arrival, has really been focused on improving our ability and access to the intelligence function in terms of across our organization and interacting with other organizations and provincially. He's also done a great job introducing some more technical level of investigations, which creates new tools and opportunities for our officers to investigate sometimes complex crimes. Not everything is, you find the person with the proverbial TV in their hands as they're running from the break-in enter. There is a lot of investigative, a lot of technology to work through, a lot of social media, all these other types of things, which can make things very complex. So Ron's done a great job in terms of building that capacity even further inside our organization. You're seeing those results in some of these investigations. The other piece I wanted to add, just for our public, the term bail comes up a lot. I know there's some confusion in terms of social media as what bail is. The police can only hold a person for 24 hours. Like, that's it. After that, we have to release them or we have to turn them over to the court. So when we talk about bail, what bail really means is that the police have decided not to release and we turn it over to courts to decide. So anytime you see held for bail, that doesn't mean the police are just making a decision. It means we have decided to not release at our level and we are transferring that decision to the courts. And then the courts decide at a bail hearing if a person is remanded or detained in custody or they are subsequently released on recognizance of bail or whatever form of release that the justice or the judge may decide. So there's bail is courts, police release or on a police undertaking is us, just in terms of who holds the decision.
So just for clarification, Deputy Chief Hansen said that you have more people that you're holding in custody. Does that mean here or at the courthouse?
So that are being remanded into custody as opposed to being released by the justice of the peace. So we're holding people for bail and we're putting better product forward to justify why they should be kept in custody. And then the courts are keeping them in custody and remanding them into the Sarnia jail.
Okay, so having said that, then you find that, well, number one, you've changed the way that you're framing the case, I guess is the way I would put it. But also, are you finding that there are more GPs that you can present people to?
So there's not more GPs. I think we still have the same number of JPs. It's just they are now seeing perhaps the reasons why somebody should not be given their freedom and should remain in custody because of their habitual behaviors. So we are starting to see a shift. And that was something that was, again, there's a government imposed regulations that, people will be released at the earliest possible time with the least restrictive conditions. And so we might be starting to see a pendulum swing, and that might be more a result of the community outrage over some of these habitual offenders being released. I don't know, but I can just tell you that we are starting to see more people being kept in custody.
And as a follow-up as well, you did mention, you're now, well, I can't remember the word that you used, but you're dealing with open drug use. Is that as per the provincial directive, or is that just from your own initiative?
So there's always been the ability for us to interact and deal with open drug use. I think the message that may have been received was that the prosecutors aren't going to proceed with those, so why bother? But we're now focusing on that because that is a concern of the community. They see this, their kids see it, so it's a priority for us now. So we are addressing it. So it's not something new. We could always do that, but in order to lay charges, we had to look at the totality of the circumstances. Is it near a school? Is it a repeat offender? Or there's different things that we have to take into consideration before laying a charge. So oftentimes we would just take the drugs and just let the person go on their way. But now we're actually taking more of an aggressive stance, and depending on where it's occurring, we will lay charges, or at the very least, we will take their drugs and do what's best in the situation.
So in your opinion, is that sending a message?
Let me just jump in. Okay, so a couple of caveats. So one is it's got to be found committing, which means we have to. It's got to be found committing, which means we have to be able to be there when they're doing the drugs. So we have to find them committing the offense, like simple possession. Like we need to be there. So let's just go back. If we're reactive all the time, and someone calls in open drug use, which people do, and rightfully so, but it's, can we get an officer there before whatever that drug is consumed? Like we all see the little huddles. How long is that huddle going to last when we get an officer? So it's important to understand, although we're responding to this whenever we can, there are some challenges. Like we don't have 10 officers waiting to respond to those. We still have to prioritize, and we still have to go to these other functions. If we do have the ability to make an arrest and lay a charge, we certainly strongly consider that. But you also have to understand that, as we have put out publicly, the Public Prosecution Service of Canada has issued directives out about, frankly, not entirely supportive of simple possession as a prosecutable offense. So if they're not even going to prosecute it, then where do you want your resource to go? So what we have focused on as an organization is, in addition to that, we haven't overlooked this because I know some folks think we have it, we haven't. What we have decided to focus on is the recidivism aspect. So when we're talking about the small group of offenders that commit a disproportionate amount of crime or disproportionately impact the health and well-being of our communities, we focus on those individuals. So we look for things like bail non-compliance, probation breaches, and you're seeing that across the board in terms of our media releases. Now, back to what Deputy Hanson was speaking about in terms of bail, we have options. We can release someone who's on breaching a court condition. We can choose to overlook it. We can put together a bail package. And just for the public, when we put together a bail package, that's a lot of work. So if someone's on a breach, but the officer decides the right thing to do, and I agree, is if someone violates court-imposed conditions, we need to enforce them, lest those conditions become meaningless. So the service position is we are going to enforce those types of things, regardless of whatever outcome the courts may impose, because as a police service, it's our job to do whatever we can within the areas we control to keep our community well-being and safety intact. So in terms of the recidivist pieces, we're doing it. Just so everyone understands that we're talking officer because the bail package is out of, it's a couple of hours to prepare all the paperwork. So the officers are certainly doing a ton of work. So when we're talking about bail, every time you see held for bail, behind the scenes, there's multiple officers working for hours on paperwork, putting things together, writing a synopsis, doing the occurrence reports, putting together the criminal records, and then, as Deputy Hanson mentioned, providing the courts with all the background so they can make a decision, an informed decision, whether the person should be released or not. And all that has to go through to the courts as a submission with the offender for them to decide. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, but certainly from a police perspective, we're very cognizant of the drug use and the nuisance that causes, the spin-offs from that. There are some challenges in the enforcement piece. The bike patrol helps, the visibility downtown helps. those types of pieces. So we're looking at everything we can do in terms of deploying our resources to address those concerns. And I think the public's seen us be very flexible in that regard.
Yeah.
But I just want folks to understand that some of those pieces are very time sensitive. And if we're not able to be there in that moment, then we miss it.
Yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
that clarification, Chief, but on, no buts. It's all a good thing, because we're seeing a different type of result than what we've been seeing in the past, and people are responding to that. So, thanks for that retracted, information, but I really appreciate it.
Maybe, Board Member Ash?
Through the chair to Deputy Vansickle. Good, the fact that the courts are now holding people instead of releasing on bail attribute to the 18% decrease in charges year over year,
For you, Mr. Chair, I think that the charges are increasing. It's the arrest center.
or the arrest, right? So the arrest, which is the difference, right? Because one arrest can have 14 different charges,
Exactly
right?
right.
So could that be a contributing factor?
Potentially, have to look at specific examples to see how many times the same individual is being.
Because
Arrest.
historically that has been the case, right? Like it's a small number of people that take up the majority of our time.
Anytime someone is in custody, they're not offending.
Right.
That's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, it's a win.
Good job.
Thank you, Lynn.
Just on,
Board Member Sebastian?
just on that point, there was a significant announcement came out from Ontario Attorney General, and they placed about 40 JPs. Lambton did not get any. And we know through our interaction with the court and processing and the type of charges that they're looking at, that resource constraints are a significant concern. So to the degree that we can work together to influence how those JPs get placed, that could be something that we focus on strategically.
But, and to your point, finally, because you're going to be a PSB, can you raise that issue?
Yeah. Agree.
And we're sympathetic to the resource challenges of our courts and crowns and like certainly it's there. But I just want the board to know that that's not a consideration when we have to do our work. Like
No,
it's like just for us, like we have to do what we have to do. The courts are resourcing is not a police responsibility for them, and we have to deal with the reality of what our officers are dealing with on the street. And the courts are, again, while we sympathize and we wish them much resourcing, it's we're not going to slow our pace because they don't have the resources.
Well, a very impressive report suggests that the service is very, very busy and lots of different activities, always concerning some of the level of violence that we're seeing. But thank you for your work. Just as we close this off, I couldn't but help but notice on the community engagement page, we had introduced a canine unit, and now it looks like we've introduced a, what do we call that?
Mountain.
A mountain unit, yes. So Chief, are we going into a new direction now?
I think we could say that policing is often a overly serious business, and every once in a while, it's nice to have a little moment of levity with the public that we serve and internally with our officers. And I think you saw on April 1st, April Fool's Day, we engaged in a little bit of fun, and I went through some effort to actually make the horse thing look pretty good. And it was fun for all involved. It was an opportunity to smile, great comments from the public. So we appreciate a little bit of humor in our day to day.
That's great. All right, let's move on to item. Oh, sorry, Board Member McRoberts.
Between the OPP and the Sarnia police, the amount of people under influence driving and being in accidents all through Lambton County, it's out of control. I know we don't have cars as people want, just like we used to have back in the day. Oh, there's a cop car on whatever street, everybody avoid it. Like, we don't have that kind of staffing, but the calls are coming up frequently. Like, or do we have a plan to have I know I can't have a million hotlines coming in place, but can we not say to the community, if you see somebody driving erratically in front of you, place the 911 call. Don't just get on Facebook and say, hey, some guy's driving a truck. That seems to be what it is. Or, hey, I saw somebody doing whatever, and they're all just going to Facebook to put it. Can we not drive them to say, if you call that in, that's an emergency, like they're crashing into, I'm not sure if that pickup truck was going to work and he was high. Into the gate. What do we do as a police service to mitigate this?
So a couple different levels. We do, of course, any type of accident, we respond. And part of the assessment, any is the driver impaired by drug or alcohol. We release on a regular basis significant impaired driving incidences, which you've seen. And we agree that impaired driving is a crime in progress. And if someone sees an impaired driver, they should call 911. We have had a lot of successful arrests based on citizen calls for service. There was one recently with someone asleep behind the wheel, and officers investigated, and it turned out to be another impaired driving incident. Like we do depend on the citizens to call it in. Availability is another piece, but we certainly would like to reduce impaired driving at every opportunity, because it truly puts everyone at risk. It's not just the driver, it's everybody on the road, be it a pedestrian, cyclist, or other vehicle operators.
I would like that. It's almost our responsibility as a community. We want to protect our neighbors, so if that can make it into anybody's story in a newspaper, that would be the awesome. I say that we need to be proactive in protecting ourselves.
Matt Canada offers a campaign 911. Essentially, is if you go to the website, it's all the reasons what an impaired driver looks like, that you should call 911. That it's a crime in progress. So they have a great program. You've seen it on some of our social media, the campaign 911, or it's in our media releases. We'll often add that point that it's a crime in progress, but it's a great point. It's certainly an area that we can always strive to improve in.
Board Member Gillis.
So I'm going to bring it back even further, if I may. You mentioned focus on bicycles and pedestrians. And we have a lot of pedestrians that are staggering across the roads. And I've got many phone calls from people saying, what do I do? I say, call 911, but I don't know if that's the right thing to do, because problem being made to the other side. But when you're trying to cross 4 lanes like Exmouth or Front Street or Christina Street, these seem to be the places where it happens most frequently from the calls that I get. I mean, what do we do in a case like that? That's my first question. Second question, though, it's not a question. It's just an observation. And kudo is the great, dare I say, great truck that everyone recognizes now on Michigan Avenue is like in operation, like continually. Always see those coming up from something. I see the flashing lights and just thinking, oh, got another one. And it's not that you're hiding, and it's not that you're not a different color. So it's hello, and of course the lights on the top you would think would shout or scream at you. I've got a cop car behind me, but no. And it's just amazing to me. And I'm hoping that I was hoping that people will kind of get the message, but obviously they haven't. So there might be new people in town, I don't know. But you're doing an amazing job on Michigan. And I just wanted to say thank you. But what do you do about pedestrians?
So we'll give credit to the traffic unit. So Sergeant Domry Price and Constable Mark Berger and Constable Mike Ross do an excellent job. Dedicated traffic officers. They're up there making a big difference in terms of focused enforcement for traffic safety. So that's who you're seeing to a large part, in addition to the patrol officers as available doing that component. In terms of the people crossing the street, I would suspect subjectively that some of those folks, it's not necessarily a jaywalking problem. It may be some form of a pedestrian impairment issue in many cases. And I would say that is a literal danger to their life if they're wandering in and out of traffic, and that's a 911 call. So we would go and assess, and again, it would be what we're dealing with. Our number one concern is obviously the safety of the individual. So they may have to be taken to hospital or taken to a place of safety, those types of things. But if someone is unable to make rational decisions and dodging traffic to the point of they're endangered, that is definitely not.
And it's not just an endangerment to themselves, but it's also to who are driving.
Yes.
It's pretty scary. So just bring that to everyone's attention.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 7, a new board policy. probably not as exciting as the previous discussion, but we received communication from the Inspector General that advising that municipal police boards would be advised to adopt a critical points policy. If you look at the policy, it simply develops a framework by which the chief and the board would communicate under certain circumstances. I think some of this has already probably been in place, practically speaking, but this clarifies the parameters. So, Chief, did you want to say anything about this before we open it up for motion?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think it's as you mentioned, from a practical standpoint, I think we would do this anyway, but I think it never hurts to have a policy in place. The IG certainly identified this as an opportunity for boards, and I think we're one of the early adopters, I think, of this, if that's fair to say, Ron. And it makes a lot of sense. Now, it does define critical points, and the source of this is likely Toronto, GTA areas where those large incidents occur, but that's not to say they couldn't happen here. So if we do encounter such a thing, having a policy to fall back on is always a good thing to ensure that we don't miss any steps. So we're supportive. We think it's a positive addition to our procedures.
Okay. I have a motion to adopt this policy. Board Member McRoberts moves, and I didn't see who was first. So I'll go with Board Member Gillis as the secondary. Any questions or comments about the policy?
Just a comment.
Board Member
I like to
Gillis.
read the policies. And I was really pleased to see this being put into a policy, just if for nothing else, to identify the chain of command. But also the fact that it did itemize specifics. And because, to your point, yes, I figured it wasn't just for the GTA, but any larger community other than ourselves. But because we are a border community, given the world we live in right now, we can never take anything for granted. And when we look at what has happened in other provinces and smaller communities, it seems to be that we are the magnet now. So I'm glad we do have this policy because it's needed whether we like it or not.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the table. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Right, thank you. That policy is adopted. And then that brings us to item number 8, the 2024 annual report. So Chief, I'll let you speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the board is aware, every year we are required by legislation to publish an annual report on our activities, and I'm pleased to share the 2024 report with the board. I will say behind the scenes, there's a great deal of effort. Marika, Leo, corporate comps team has done a tremendous effort to try to compile all this information, and every level of every unit has gone through to review and make sure that it's an accurate reflection of our activities last year. So, subject to any questions the board may have, we'd like to make that publicly available.
I thought it was excellent, and thank you to you, Chief, and Marika, and the rest of the staff for putting it together. It's a really nice, as we look back over the years, it really encapsulates what 2024 was for the service. Any questions or comments, Board Member
I would
Roberts?
like to make one comment. In 2024, there were 39,000, roughly, just up to 550, 39,000 arrests. That's 106. Okay,
See arrests.
not arrests, sorry, interactions where someone's been taken into custody or whatever. That's 108 a day. So for folks that say, I just saw a car going by and somebody was smoking something on the corner, they didn't stop to look after them. You're always in the process, right? I can't imagine there's officers just driving around, just looking for something to do, because on the ride along, there's always a list, right? And I was overwhelmed when someone's coming on at 3 p.m. or whatever time they start their shift. There's already 50 or 80 things on your list for them to prioritize, right? 108 a day of real time. So that's a huge number for Sarnia. Like, that's all just, the police are not sitting at the coffee shops. They are actually doing their job, and kudos, because the report was great. That was the one that just kind of took me back, and why I can't believe that is happening. Like, that number is massive. But thank you.
I was impressed by all the pictures.
Yours was great.
That you were in?
The community involvement, right?
Board Member Gillis.
Two things. Number one, do you have hard copies of this, of the report?
Yeah, once we're final approved and it's ready to go, we will print our copies.
Okay, thank you, because I like to have it for my reference on there, but also, one thing I noticed was the amount of, it just kind of blew me away, the amount of innovation that's happened over the past year. New things coming in, and none of them seem to be as a result of direction from the province or the feds. It's innovation that you have taken upon yourself to create a better and a well-defined, more efficient police service, and how you integrate it various silos. That was really, really interesting. I hadn't really taken into account, you'll hear all the anachronisms, but you don't realize, to me, when I hear anachronism that I have no idea what it is, I think that it's something brand new. But what it actually is, or has presented itself to be, is integration of everything that's all come together and recognizing the synergies between the units. And I found that very interesting. I really appreciate the fact that you have done that, because we're trying to do more with less. But this is one thing where people's expertise are being really well used, because they're not stuck in one thing. They get to be integrated and move more than them. You see this happening in this industry. It's you're happy to see it over its way down in public service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that report will be distributed at City Council, to Aamjiwnaang, and posted on the website. So thank you again. Let's move on to our health and safety report. This is an annual report, and Chief, I'll have you speak to that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Scrolling through the annual report, which is longer than it looks. Okay. This is part of an annual regular report that the board will see. We've made some effort in the background to just explain a little more of why the report is before you. So it's the Joint Health and Safety Committee to review workplace issues, make recommendations, and just some of the activities of the Joint Health and Safety Committee, which Jason has really reinvigorated inside the organization over the last couple of years. So this is part of the annual report of those activities, which is a joint initiative between management and the Sarnia Police Association to make sure that we have safe working conditions for everyone. Subject to any questions the board may.
Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, thank you. Does that is that a report that gets put on the website, or is that more just internal?
I don't think it's posted. It's a public here in
Yeah.
terms of the minutes that are posted public. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to the financial quarter report, first quarter of 2025. And Kathy, I'll look to you for that one.
Yeah, the first quarter report is showing with limited data at this point, but expecting an approximate surplus for year end of 133,000. Again, it's very early, so I would caution on that it's the data is limited at this point, but overall we're on track. Variance is within again, largely driven by salary up, and then our budget lines that we need to, I'll say, right slice in the upcoming budget. Yeah, very little else that really stands out.
It's nice to know we're running on track. So board member Sebastian and then board member Gil. Ash, thank you.
Yeah, just a comment of caution. Our revenues are significantly high, but if we look at the categories of expenditures, in almost every category, with the exception of compensation and benefits, which is being driven by gap in seats at the Ontario Police College, we are actually overspent. The revenue category is unpredictable and not something that we can rely upon or sustain within the service. So we need to really understand how we're going to manage to those continuous categories. That's really the reality of this budget.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and I agree with you, Board Member Sebastian. I think what we're seeing is over the last few years, we've been seeing a trend towards right-sizing budgets. Like we've been overspent in a number of categories because those budget categories haven't realistically been realistic in terms of what they should be, and we're looking forward to making sure that they are more appropriate as we move forward. Go ahead.
And to the chief, in terms of again, and we continue to be underspent because of our limitations and constraints, what is the direct, I think it's important for us to hear, what is the direct impact of the understaffing to the service?
In what regard?
So we're underspent in staffing, and that's typically because we can't get cadets through to the college. What are the direct impacts of not having the right amount of staff in the organization?
So just in the frame of the question, we'll never be overstaffed because that would be irresponsible as a budget. So the way we only have certain windows to send to the police college. So we look at our vacancies and we look to fill the vacancies that as they come through. Our last class was 8. So we're actually having a much better result in terms of getting people to the college. Not everyone is successful at that particular training. So sometimes we don't get the full numbers back. And then we've got another intake in the fall, but we base it on vacancies. So if you think in terms of responsible staffing levels, we never overstaff. We're not at that stage. Some services do, we do not. So there's always going to be a small gap there, which we try to keep as narrow as possible, given our given the availability of seats. It's also not just police officers. We have a number of civilian initiatives that we've looked at as well in terms of can we take workload from sworn officers that have a cost affixed to them, and can we take some of that work and put it to the civilian side? You've seen a large expansion of civilian resourcing in terms of how we are administering the police service internally to meet our operational requirements. So the short answer is the less people, the less we have to work with, but at the same time, we have to balance that with responsible budgeting, which means we're not over hiring. We base it on our authorized strength through the board, and that's what we work to do.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at overhiring. My concern was if you look at the projected deficit at 1.6, 1.7 million, and you divide that by a simple salary calculation of about 200,000 per person, that's about 8 people understaffed. That means we may not be getting to things that we need to, and that's kind of what I was trying to understand.
So we have to adapt on a regular basis to changing circumstances, whether it's a legislative change, equipment changes. So we adapt and review our budget on an ongoing basis. There's a certain amount of flexibility that's necessary in emergency services. So I understand what you're saying in terms of projections, but we have been within our budget for the past 3 years. We continue to look for opportunities if there's a savings to deploy that in a piece of innovation or a piece of technology or building efficiencies or cohesion. So we are using the scraps, if you will, to improve the organization where we can. And if there are no scraps available, then we won't do it. Like, we're not going to be in an overspent position unless some calamity occurs that's beyond our control. Other services are facing some of those challenges. I can say that responsibly here, we have done a number of initiatives to make sure that our budget is well in control. Overtime being a classic example. I think at the last report, Kathy mentioned that we're at a 10-year historic low for overtime, which speaks to your original question. Like, we're able to reduce the overtime. We still don't have the staff members, but we've created obviously some efficiencies because we're also in an environment of increased workloads. Mm-hmm. So I think we're doing really well.
Board Member Ash. Any other questions or comments on the report? All right, well, thank you for that. That brings us to item number 11. So new facility update. I'm going to have us have this item on every meeting agenda just to keep the momentum going. We want to, as we reported to City Council, we want to make sure that we're engaging with the community and keeping them up to date on our progress. So at the last City Council meeting, City Council approved the allocation of 15 acres for the new police facility, and thank you to Board Member McRoberts for the motion that initiated that decision. And so where we're at right now is we're working with city staff. The land will be in the area of Wellington Street East, either north of the road or south of the road. The chief has provided some parameters for what that land needs to be considered, or what characteristics that land needs to have. But other than that, wherever the city decides to allocate the exact property is open. So we have conversations with the city about that. And then we are meeting with the architect, which the board approved at a previous meeting. We're meeting with the architect on June 3rd. And so we're hoping to move this project forward. And once again, the goal is that we can submit budget estimates to the city for the 2026 budget in terms of the first phase. So I'll just open it up for questions or comments from board members. And Chief, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Mr. Chair, I think you've summarized it well.
There are 15 acres on the north side of Wellington Street at Woodland. Isn't that right where the research park is?
Sorry, well, yes, but it's on the other side. If you know where the research park is, there's a whole bunch, a very big piece of open. And then beyond that, there has been a working piece of property that's been rented out. But it's still owned by the city, as I understand it. So there's a lot of property there. The nice part about where the one is that you're looking at is that you've got access off of a road with another road that is potential on the east side of it. So there are all the undergrounds, as I understand it, are there. So it's not a question of having to do a lot of work to bring in the infrastructure that you need. I think that the land roads are there and they're capped. So, and there's a pump station right across the street from. So that's, to me, that's the ideal spot. If that's what you are looking at, yeah, that's the one I would have chosen for me.
Okay, so more to come on that. And I think once we have that land allocated, we'll get a site plan up so that we and the public can sort of picture where that is, because there's some other things going in there that I understand the Humane Society and the EMS. It'd be interesting to see how all this fits together. So
Yeah, the Humane Society's on the other side of the road.
Yeah, they're on the 6th.
yeah, so we did not specify whether we wanted the north or the south, as long as the property can meet the needs of the facility. So more to come on that. Right, that brings us to item number 12, our open forum. Any items from the board? Board Member McRoberts.
I spoke out of the county in regards to homelessness. The report was that they had 20 people that they had reported live rough in all of Lambton County.
20.
I do come out with a group. I missed 4 weeks because I had new puppies, but I went out a week ago and that was double that they had shown me. And I mean, that's one person enough, right? That doesn't have to be a massive group encampment. So there were a lot more than, not that I was saying they weren't doing their job at all. I just wanted to know why can't the health unit, police, bylaw, county outreach, impact teams, why do we not have one source where we can have live updating? The public shouldn't get to know where people are because we don't want, right, people coming and attacking them or doing whatever. I just want all of the services to know what's going on so we have the same numbers. So I can't go to the county and say, here guys, I'm going to show you where everybody is. We should all be in contact. So if we could, can the chief have the impact team give us a monthly report on the average of how many people as close to our meeting that they have seen their living up, and just so we're all getting the best that we can to look after the people, look after the community, and try and move forward with this, right? I know that when the police see them, do you need to go to the hospital? Do you need help? Do you need it? So they're checking in with them. Everybody's doing their little bit, but if we're not communicating, we're not trying to come to a solution and try and prove the best stats we can going forward so that we can get the real help.
I think the definitive list would be the by name list that the county holds, because they're the central. So from a very practical, like at a street level perspective, we are the city of Sarnia. And then everything outside of that is OPP. from a policing perspective. The county, umbrella to all of us, is responsible for that global perspective. And they maintain that, my understanding is on that by name list, which I don't know how much is shared with that on an ongoing basis. I can tell you that Impact this year, just looking at the numbers right now, have dealt with 222 people so far this year, January to May 22nd, who are uniquely encountering homelessness issues. So 222 individuals that they've already dealt with in 2025 that have challenges around homelessness.
I believe the report we just got was 275 on the
Yeah.
binding list. It's our monthly update. But I'm speaking like truly rough. There are still those folks that just can't get past that. But when they said we've housed a lot of people, I get that. They're that 275, but the rough ones that just can't get to that point, there's more than 20.
So I can't speak for the county, but I can say certainly the city of Sarnia bylaw department with Chris Carter's side has we've had multiple meetings. We're about to implement a new system where the citizens of Sarnia can have a single point of contact for these issues. And then behind the scenes, we're going to coordinate better between bylaw and us. We're always looking for ways to improve that. So that's coming as we're just in the implementation stage. And without getting ahead of myself, I think there was a report to council that went about a pilot project in terms of that's what I'm speaking about. So we are looking to actually incorporate bylaw response onto police dispatch, and then have better information sharing structures so that we can count exactly, Mr. Roberts, as you're mentioning. So it's just understand behind the scenes, so it's a little disjointed in the response. County has sold the social services, the by name. We're just the city. The OPP deals with the other pieces. There's not a lot of cross traffic in that regard. And even within our county, like the OPP is responsible for Point Edward, even though we completely surround it and we deal with the cross traffic. Like it's two separate response groups, even though from a practical perspective, we're fully integrated. So there's administrative challenges, unfortunately.
I would just be concerned, and I'd like to take our numbers to county because we have our impact team saying 34 that we contacted in the last week. And I go to the county and they're still at 20. We have to figure out where.
Oh, the city of Sarnia is by far carrying the much greater burden of those particular issues in terms of impact on the community, ripple effects, like by far.
I just want the professionals to share the locations. The folks need the most help they can so we can get them off the street.
So we do track locations. Some of these locations aren't standard addresses, as you can well imagine. So we use tools like What Three Words to say, here's the location at a specific spot. And then that's shared with our impact team. Impact does our first outreach with bylaw, those types of components, who's there, what do they require in terms of support? Can we get you to resources? And then we deal with all the ancillary issues as we progress through that ladder response.
Thank you for the initiative too with the bylaw.
I can say the city staff have been a pleasure to work with. They're very positive. They've got a ton of challenges as well. So we're better together.
Okay, thank you then. We'll ask for a motion to move to closed session. Actually, sorry, I missed item number 13, closed meeting report. So in our closed meeting, we will have an HR update, an update on collective agreements, and those are the two items. So I'll ask for a motion to adjourn to closed session. Board Member Ash and Board Member Sebastian, all those in favor? We're adjourned. We'll reconvene.